Let's begin today's devotion, day 7 of our 8 days through First Chronicles, by reading the description of how David ordered the musical part of the worship that took place at the tabernacle. So David has obviously erected this tent where he has now brought the ark into it, and now they're in the process of ordering the service at this tabernacle. How is the worship to be taken care of? And they are appointing, obviously, priests to be doing the sacrifices and the other things that the sons of Aaron did. Then musicians, which is what I want to comment on today. And then gatekeepers and those who would, usher people through and stop those who were unclean. And so there was a whole, thousands of people actually were involved in this whole order of service that took place throughout the year in Israel. So today I want to pull out 6 principles of music which we learn from this ordering of the worship of God at the tabernacle. So let's read these verses together. Moreover, David and the captains of the army separated for the service some of the sons of Asaph, of Heman, and of Jeduthun, who should prophesy with harps, stringed instruments, and cymbals, and the number of the skilled men performing their service was: of the sons of Asaph, Zaccur, Joseph, Nethaniah, and Asherelah. The sons of Asaph were under the direction of Asaph, who prophesied according to the order of the king. Of Jeduthun, the sons of Jeduthun were Gedaliah, Zeri, Jeshiah, Shimei, Hashabiah, and Mattatiah, 6 under the direction of their father Jeduthun, who prophesied with a harp to give thanks and to praise the Lord. Of Heman, the sons of Heman, Bukiah, Mattaniah, Uzziel, Shebuel, Jeremoth, Hananiah, Hanani, Eliatar, Gidalti, Romamti-Ezer, Joshbekashah, Maloti, Hotir, and Mahazioth. All these were the sons of Heman, the king's seer, in the words of God, to exalt his horn, like the strength of his family. For God gave Heman 14 sons and 3 daughters. All these were under the direction of their father for the music in the house of the Lord, with cymbals, stringed instruments, and harps for the service of the house of God. Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman were under the authority of the king. So the number of them, with their brethren who were instructed in the songs of the Lord, all who were skillful, was 288, and they cast lots for their duty, the small as well as the great, the teacher with the student. So there we have this wonderful description of how David ordered the musical service at the tabernacle. And we see it was under 3 men, Heman, Asaph, and Jeduthun, and they reported directly to David the king, and then under them, each of them had their family, which they led, and then they divided these families into divisions, which would serve throughout the year. And in fact, they divided them into 24 divisions. So your division led the worship in the tabernacle for a month every 2 years, which is one of the principles I want to pick up on. So here are the 6 principles I want to pull out, which I think do apply or carry through to us in the New Testament church. Number 1, let's just remind ourselves, verse 3. This is Jeduthun and his sons. The sons were under their father Jeduthun, who prophesied with a harp to give thanks and to praise the Lord. It says something similar of the sons of Heman. It says that they were there for the service of the house of God. So the first point I want to make is this: music is designed by God for use in his praise. People didn't make up music. That's not like we didn't think up, oh wow, we've stumbled upon the fact that inadvertently we can actually use our voices to sing at different levels, and then we can create instruments that harmonize with our voices, and wow, we've designed something completely new that was never in the mind of God. No, God designed music. He created the whole concept of music, and it was designed for one purpose only: to worship Him, to glorify Him. Music has a way of being able to lift our hearts and free us from the burdens of life and of the stresses of life and of all the stuff that drags our hearts away from God. It has a way of cutting those impediments away from us and lifting our hearts up to God in worship. It liberates us. It frees us. And of course, music has been perverted and used in so many ways to do that same thing, but for the things of the world. Go to rock concerts and you will see people forgetting about their morality, forgetting about the teachings of their parents, forgetting about the confines of culture, and doing things and expressing things because music incites them. This is why countries have national anthems, to incite, to stir national patriotism. Music is a very powerful thing. Well, I'm here to tell you, it was designed by God for His worship. So, you can draw whatever conclusions you want to about the legitimacy of using music for other things now. Is it okay to just sing a love song to your loved one? Is it okay to just sing love songs in general? Is it okay to sing songs that exalt relationships that are not marital relationships, as so many of our modern songs do exalt? Is that okay to use music to do that? Well, I'm going to let you make your own judgments. What I'm saying to you is music was designed by God for His worship. In fact, there's a verse in Amos which I'll read you. It's Amos chapter 6, verse 5. And Amos he's the prophet speaking on behalf of God, obviously. He is denouncing the wealthy, idle people of Israel who don't love God and are enjoying all of the wealth that He's given them. And he is saying, woe to you who put off the day of doom. Woe to you who never even think about the day of your death or the day of God's judgment which is coming upon this nation. Woe to you. You lie on beds of ivory, you stretch out on couches, you eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall. Now listen to this. Who sing idly to the sound of stringed instruments and invent for yourselves musical instruments like David. There God is saying, woe to you, because you're just enjoying your life with no regard for God, with no regard for the coming judgment, and you use the instruments of David that were designed for the worship of God for your own idle music and singing. Wow, that's going to be an unpopular sentiment. But anyway, there we go. I believe it's biblical. Number 2, music, using music and singing, particularly to worship God, is the duty of all, especially those who believe. It is the duty of all. So it is here called a service. And Matthew Henry comments on this word service, and he says, this is here called a service, and the persons employed in it, workmen. And he says, this intimates that it is our duty to make a business of it, and stir up all that is within us to it, and that in our present state of corruption and infirmity, it will not be done as it should be done without labor and struggle. We must take pains with our hearts to bring them and keep them to this work, and to engage all that is within us. Wow, when I read that one, I thought that is an incredible piece of commentary. Matthew Henry says it is our duty to worship God in singing. And there are going to be times where, because we are lethargic in sin and we are fallen, weak creatures, we are not going to want to do it with all our hearts. And he says we must stir ourselves up to do it. It is the duty of all believers to sing worship to God. And in fact, in verse 1, we saw it was not just David that was involved in separating the different divisions of the singers. It was the captains of the army. I mean, what are the army generals doing, making sure that God's worship and singing is ordered? Well, they knew that the nation's victory in battle relied upon the nation's right worship of God. Number 3, the worship of God in music is a corporate pursuit. So public, corporate singing, though it may seem strange to the average onlooker when they look at the church, raising their hands and singing worship to God together. Know this, it is good in the sight of God for us to gather and worship. Fourthly, the corporate worship of the church should be led by skillful, mature men. So we have here these three guys, Asaph, Haman, and Jeduthun. And then in verse 7 it says, so the number of them with their brethren who were instructed in the songs of the Lord, all who were skillful, were 288. Those were all their sons and the people that joined them. And they cast lots for their duty, the small as well as the great, the teacher with the student. So in all of these divisions, there is authority. There is the teacher and there is the student. There is the older, there is the younger. My fear is that we sometimes throw young people into leading worship in churches, and they are not under the authority of anyone mature. We need to have mature, older believers leading the younger believers as we all worship together. Otherwise, I'm telling you now, what has happened in many places in the church will continue to happen, that worship will become idolatry, it will become full of pride, and it will become immature. So it must be led by skillful men, and yet in divisions that did not exalt a few high-profile people. Think about this. You know, worship leaders in our day have almost become rock stars. Now that is what is avoided here by these divisions. Here, it doesn't matter how skillful you were under the authority of an older, more mature believer in your worship, and you only led worship for a month, and then for 2 years, you didn't lead worship again. Now, I'm not saying that needs to be the order in a local church. I'm just saying there is a principle here, not to give too much attention for too long a period of time to single worship leaders. Principle number 5. Musicians should be trained within the church. Now that comes out of the same verse we just read, that the older was with the younger, the teacher with the student. We should have mechanisms, schools within our local church to raise up godly musicians. And what would be taught there is the kind of things we're discussing here. A biblical view of music, a biblical right understanding of music and how it fits in to the church and how it's designed by God for his worship. Theological training, so that the lyrics of the music that we write are good, biblically, theologically sound lyrics, which is the next point we're going to get to, number 6. So let's have schools, let's raise up structures within the local church that can train and teach young musicians. And then number 6, lyrics are very important. Lyrics being the song words that we sing. In fact, what the words we sing are the most important thing about the music. It is called prophesying in these verses we read. These men, as they sang the worship of God, they were prophesying. And of course, that reminds us of Paul's words in Ephesians, where he says we are to speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. When we are singing worship together, we are actually speaking to one another. We are preaching, we are prophesying to one another. And so let's make sure that the words we're singing are theologically mature. So there you go, 6 principles for music in the church, and I think there's some stuff that we can learn from there. So God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow.